Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Almeida, and I'm going to inform my audience today about the global war on terrorism. Okay, so the global war on terrorism started in 2001 with the invasion of Afghanistan and expanded in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq, and is currently ongoing with Operation Inherent Resolve in Syria. Did you know that terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 led to the global war on terrorism? On that day, 2,970 people were killed when 4 U.S. airliners were hijacked by terrorists and crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and an open field in Pennsylvania. As a U.S. Army soldier and veteran in Operation Enduring Freedom 2009 and 2010, I've had a first-hand account of the global war on terrorism and conducted extensive research on the global war on terrorism. The global war on terrorism is one of the longest conflicts in U.S. history. It is important to know about how it started and the current operations of the global war on terrorism. I will begin by discussing how the global war on terrorism began, then discuss by the operations that fall under the umbrella of the global war on terrorism, which are Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And these are the two major operations, followed by the current global war on terrorism conflict with the Islamic State. Understanding the global war on terrorism is an important part of U.S. history. The global war on terrorism, which began in 2001, rapidly expanded. To begin, President George Bush, shortly after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks in the U.S., announced that the war on terror had begun. Now, here President Bush vowed to take actions against those responsible for the 9/11 attacks on the U.S., and a few days after the attacks, on September 14th, the authorization for use of military force against terrorists was made law and authorized by President Bush to use all necessary and appropriate forces against those organizations associated with the 9/11 attacks. In addition, the war expanded to two major conflicts. The first major conflict was Operation Enduring Freedom. Operation Enduring Freedom kicked off with the U.S. invading Afghanistan in October 2001, with the intent to find Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. Osama bin Laden was killed by special forces in 2011, and Operation Enduring Freedom ended in December 2014. Now that we know how the war began, let's look at how it expanded once again. The global war on terrorism, we'll call it Gwot for short, expanded again with the invasion of Iraq. To begin, President Bush announced in 2003 that the U.S. would invade Iraq for fear that Saddam Hussein was harboring weapons of mass destruction. With his capture, Saddam Hussein was tried for crimes against humanity, and after being found guilty, was hung in 2006. U.S. armed forces still combated Iraqi militants long after his death, and as they continued to disband one of the major terrorist groups in Iraq, Al-Qaeda. As a result of the invasion, the U.S. armed forces occupied Iraq from 2003 to 2013. From 2003 through 2013, the U.S. armed forces, at its height of this operation, saw an estimated 150,000 U.S. troops combat those terrorists and to assist the Iraqi government in training their force. The operation ultimately took the lives of more than 4,800 troops and ended in September of 2010. Now that we know about the invasion of Iraq, let's look at how the global war on terrorism continues today. For example, in 2014, the U.S. announced Operation Inherent Resolve. The operation is designed to combat the Islamic State, with President Obama citing the 2001 authorization for use of the military force against all terrorist organizations. Now, he used President Obama used the same bill passed by President Bush to continue to combat the Islamic State, which is a terrorist organization. On September 21st, 2014, the U.S. and its allies began airstrikes on known ISIS targets. In addition, U.S. drones strikes continue to engage the Islamic State as of today. As of December of 2015, the U.S. has launched more than 9,000 airstrikes to combat ISIS. The Gwot is still an ongoing conflict with no end in sight. Now let me conclude by restating that the Gwot started in 2001 with the 9/11 attacks, expanded in 2003 with the Iraq invasion, and continues today with the fight against ISIS. First, we learned that the Gwot started in 2001, with President Bush announcing the war on terrorism shortly after the 9/11 attacks. Then, the Gwot began its two conflicts: Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. Secondly, we took a look at those two operations: Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. At the height of Operation Iraqi Freedom, 150,000 troops occupied Iraq. Finally, we took a look at the ongoing Gwot, Operation Inherent Resolve, which was announced in 2014 to combat the Islamic State. In closing, the global war on terrorism started in 2001 with the current presence of the Islamic State. We as a nation are moving into the 15th year of this ongoing war. As a soldier, when you're armed with the history of the Gwot and how it has moved from operation to operation, then you will have a better understanding that this just might not end soon.